Hey folks, this is Tony and welcome to some more game dev. Coming back again this weekend looking at more enemy behavior stuff. Last Sunday, we worked on some enemy behavior modifications, kind of dug back into how the enemy AI systems are working and how it's selecting its different abilities. Played around with some different tuning values on the numbers of like how long each enemy's action takes before it triggers, and then eventually kind of came to this realization that we wanted to maybe try exploring separating the movement of the AI out from the actual attack action of the AI. And that's kind of where we ended up leaving it. We also did a little bit of work getting the attack miss system set up so that the player can actually miss attacks. And I was just playing with moving that to all of the player's attacks and seeing if we could get that to function just a little bit off camera. So the main thing here is we want to just add miss directly into the damage effect. That way it's being affected by everything. I'm going to double check audio volumes real quick. Hold just for a second, because the sound sounds a little bit high. We're going to bring things down just a little bit. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, off camera, I was just setting it up so damage effect had miss baked into it because we had kind of overridden and added this extra miss in here. I'm going to see if we turn this one off, which should be the one that we had set up last week, and we just have this simplified version I was working on. Hopefully that should still allow us to attack miss, and it should work for all of our attack abilities now. Once that's done, the next thing I want to look at in terms of AI behavior, beyond just breaking up the enemy's actions, see if we can miss with bash. We can now. Okay, so that looks to be set up correctly. So we can now miss with bash, which is important because we're going to start trying to interweave that into this system as well. But the thing I want to look at next, well, we've got a couple of options actually, because there's a short list I have. We have potentially looking at the enemy movement. Specifically, I'd like to see about having it so the enemy doesn't just choose its movement squares based off distance and randomized, but actually has some sort of priority system. So it like will try to get to the side of the player in some way that might be predictable, so that if you use AoE type abilities, you might be able to hit the enemy even though they're moving. So in order to accomplish all of that, I think that there's a couple of different directions we could start on today. I think I want to dig into the biggest one first, and then we can look at some of the smaller tasks later. So the first thing I'd like to try and figure out is there a way to make it so that we have an ability set up for an AI where it will not just try and move to a preferred distance away from the player, but will try to move to specific squares based off the player's current facing. So in this situation, we might want to have an ability that says, hey, you can move to the left or to the right, but the AI would want to always move to the square next to the player. Yeah, and I want to start digging into that because that's probably the one that I have the least kind of intuitive knowledge on how I would want to implement it. So we'll start there. So currently, when we have our attack patterns that we set up last week, we have bow attack pattern, and this one is going to try and do an AI run into this AI bow. And the AI run has no ability associated with it. So it says, hey, you're not trying to perform any ability. I'm just going to get you to move. And I'm going to say that you need to move to a preferred distance of 2. This will have a CT of 2, so it'll take 2 turns to execute. And it will only do this ability if the player is 1 away, min and max distance of 1. Yeah. And then after it does that AI run, it does the AI bow. The dash attack has it trying to move towards the player and then trying to do its AI attack action. So I think what I'm looking to do is for this AI dash construct an ability that somehow tells it where it wants to move to. Let's take a look and dig into how the AI is currently choosing its movement. So that's not inside of the AI evaluation system, it's inside of the state machine. The AI evaluation system component probably could just be removed from a lot of these AIs as well, because I don't think they're actually using it. So inside of foe attack, this is where it tries to figure out which ability it wants to do next. Let's open this up a little bit. Yeah, so decide next attack. We'll get the distance to the foe, and then based off of that distance, it will try and pick a pattern, an attack pattern. And then set some information based off of that telegraphed attack pattern. And then when we actually go to perform an attack, we check to see if the CT value is currently greater than 0, in which case we just do nothing. Basically, that's the plan, is to just sit there. Otherwise, if it's less than 0 or equal to 0, then we will set the telegraphed plan of attack as the next thing the AI will do. And then here, if the ability inside of that plan of attack is not equal to null, then it will try and plan some positioning stuff based off of that movement. Otherwise, if the ability is equal to null, it will try and move towards the nearest foe, essentially. If it has an ability, it will go through and try and look at all the movement options, and get movement options is checking everything in range based off of the override range if there is one. If it's -1, then it'll just get the normal movement range of that unit, find all those movement options, and then it'll try and rate all of the possible squares that that enemy could move to, and essentially determine which firing location would be the best spot for this AI to move to. Okay, so this is all kind of complicated in terms of like actually overriding this system. Like, the system is not going to be easy to modify in the way that I want. Because the goal here, again, is that if we have the game running and the AI is standing in front of the player, we might want the AI to move around the player and try and attack them from the side. Or potentially, if they're fast enough, even go to the back of the player and hit them from behind. So if we were to wait turns here, right now that AI is moving away. If we wait a few more turns after the range attack, it'll try and move towards us and then perform an attack. So the thing we'd like to try and do is have the AI actually move to our side and then attack us from the side. But in order for us to specifically say, hey, this is the tile we want to move to, that's trickier. Yeah, so it does get an ability. We could have some sort of class on the ability that is like preferred tile. No, when we pick a plan of attack, how do we even know who we're fighting at that moment? Like, it decides the attack before it actually does anything, and it just does a... It comes into this stuff, which is what we were looking at last weekend, was this whole attack pattern picking logic. And this comes all the way down into here, where it'll eventually just choose the ability, and the target is foe. So if we go back to the slime, specifically IT slime, and we look at when it does AI attack, yeah, it just says target foe. So does it just generically say this ability is targeting an enemy, and then somewhere inside of the attack patterns, it determines a foe that it wants to target? I guess the easy way to check this would be go into here and then find all references for the target. Interesting. Okay, so in here we have a system where it's checking is ability target match. Yeah, this is where it's rating the attacks. Okay, I remember how some of this stuff works. A lot of this logic comes from Liquid Fire blogs, tutorials, and I feel like I haven't modified it too much. There is some heavy, like, kind of changes to how the ability system works, but I think this central logic is still very close to that original tutorial. But I think I vaguely remember how... Yeah, so it's going through all the move options, finding a move tile, placing the unit on that tile temporarily, and then getting all tiles in range as fire options. And then it goes through looking at all the locations that we could attack, basically, and determining if any of those tiles that we are targeting with this attack it's constructing this attack option for this particular tile, and then from here it checks the AoE effect. So it's choosing like the center point of the attack, and then it finds all tiles in that AoE pattern from that center attack, and will determine if any of the those tiles here, when it loops through all of them, we'll find if any of those tiles match the type of target that we're looking to hit. And then it'll see if there's any, like, friendly fire or anything like that, I believe somewhere in here. I might be wrong on that part. And then I've recently been adding this priority system where I can make it so it prioritizes the player over NPCs, which is kind of half-baked and not fully set up. But it basically adds an extra higher value, I believe. Yeah, when it scores the different ability potential targets, it gives a better score if it is a priority target. Okay, so all that being said, this system doesn't really have a way of saying, I want to go to a specific tile. I guess we could try and find a way to determine specific tile locations as higher priority, but even then, that's not quite what I was thinking of doing. Oh, this might be a bigger project than I even thought. Yeah, because most of the AI's movement systems are still heavily dependent on its planning here. But for the player's movement, oftentimes when we move the player, it's not actually happening in sort of like the same way. It's happening inside of the ability. Like we have move effects inside of the actual ability itself. So I was thinking for the AI, we could have some sort of system where it actually tries to find a tile next to the targeted enemy and use that ability to, based off that target, find a place to move to. So almost like the inverse of how it's currently set up. Can we override that in some way? Is there some way to hook into this based off of our current ability and get movement options? Could we override this with specific tiles that we prefer to go to? Or would it make more sense to just find a way to increase the rating of specific movement locations? Because right now when it finds the best target, it does some amount of math to try and figure out, you know, hey, this, we're going to add a little bit of score points for each of these options, trying to figure out which one is the best one. There is an angle-based system. Is that currently turned on? It looks like score starts to best angle-based score, but that is a value that never gets set. Interesting. Oh, we got some real archaeology today. How do I want to modify this? I need to figure out how it's determining which move is the best spot. So it does option get score. When it does that, it's going through to figure out get best move target. Okay, so it's going to look through all the move targets. There's a bunch of code that we've commented out, which I've labeled as dead code, and I think this is the setup for determining the best angled score. Okay, so yeah, so this is code I currently don't have turned on because I didn't think I would care about the, like, location where they're moving to. As long as they could hit the player, that's all I cared about last time we looked at this. Yeah, we just care about the first one found. We actually don't even look past any other locations. No, okay. This part is... I see. It's just checking to see if it can hit at least one enemy. That's what it's early exiting here on. And then it tries to find the best tile to hit that one enemy it found. If I'm reading these comments correctly. Okay, so here, movement targets, we get a distance, and the distance score is based off the distance and the preferred distance. So this is how we're determining that certain moves are higher priorities because they're further away. I think this code doesn't even have any of these functions anymore. Like, it's labeled as dead code. Does it just completely fail? Or do we still have a lot of this functionality still set up somewhere? We do. Yeah, assuming that we still have all the facing stuff set up correctly, which I'm not 100% sure that we do. If we were to re-enable that dead code, it might allow us to have the enemies choose tiles that are beside or behind the player, but that may not even be... Like, the problem here is that, yeah, I could probably do that, but I don't think that is flexible enough. I actually want to have even more control. Yeah. This would allow us to get something up and running very quickly, but I actually want to do something more elaborate. So we need to find a way to more heavily integrate the ability system with the AI behavior. Oh, this gets really tricky. Because there's also problems where if we have the AI moving away from us, but it's not happening immediately, but based off of like a little bit of telegraphed information, then at the moment that the AI tries to move, the plan that it's put into place may be invalid as well, and we're going to need it to recover in that situation. Interesting. Okay. So at the moment that it's choosing the best ability or the best location, we do have access to the plan of attack, and the plan of attack does have the ability itself. So we could, in theory, go all the way back to where we kind of entered into this whole code expedition, going all the way back up, hitting back a whole bunch. Here's where we pick the plan based off independent. Can we go to where this is called? Here. If the ability is not null, we try to plan position based off of 3 different categories, whether it's a position independent ability, which says, hey, I don't care where I'm going to stand, in which case it's just going to get the move options and then just randomly choose one. It doesn't even care where you go. We don't have many abilities right now for the AI that just doesn't care about positioning. Almost everything does. How does it determine whether or not it is positionally based? Whether or not its ability range has direction orientation. What about this one? This is based off of whether or not the range has position orientation. So if we look at, like, say, the AI smash ability, for example, where is that being set? AI ranged. Oh, it's based off what type of range it is. And I think almost all of our abilities right now are line ability ranges, which means that they have a direction associated with them. So that's overridden to true. And position orientation is also set to true by default. Which makes sense. Yeah, okay. It's only if it is... Go back all the way to here. It's only if it's position independent. That it does this call. Otherwise, it'll come into here and check if it is direction independent, which says it can attack it from any direction, which I think almost all of our abilities are currently directional orientation. They attack from a specific direction. So we're almost always hitting this else statement in our current setup of how the logic works. What is a move option? It's just a list of tiles currently, and that gets added to this list, which is also just a list of tiles. So if we made this a little bit more advanced so that move targets could be both a list of its ranged movement and then priority move targets, we could have a attack plan interject a list of priority move options that could come from the ability itself. Okay, I think this is where we want to yeah. It's here for now at least. We want to inject ability priority moves. Had to sneeze. Priority. Nope. Selected moves. Cool. So then. That needs to come from the plan of attack. So this is where we'll add the ability's moves that it wants, but it has to come from, I think, the ability itself. Do we, when we evaluate the when we decide on an ability, do we validate that that ability can actually be performed? We must, right? I'm positive we looked at this last week, but I don't remember where that happens. Actually, do we not? Do we just simply assume that based off of the priority distances that I've set up, that as long as the distance to foe is correct, that this ability can be performed? It looks that way. So we don't pre-run the ability at all to predict what's going to happen, because we definitely do this for the player. So if we go to select ability screen, ability select screen. Thank you. If we go here, when we try and perform an action, we get the ability info for the specific input that you've done, and then we pass that information into the target select, and inside of target select, somewhere in here we are validating that that ability can be performed. Here. Inside of the effect-driven ability area, it looks at the ability and it predicts and gets out a list of ability targets, and it checks to see if the first ability target is valid. I see what this hack is. Okay, and then we do a little bit of magic in order to make sure the ability target is set to valid. And then inside of the actual target screen, we're making sure that the last run ability areas has targets, and it checks to see if any of the targets are valid. And if they're not valid, we return and we don't let you actually perform the ability. But all of that's happening on button select, it looks like. Yeah, when you go to try and press A, it determines whether or not there's any valid targets. Or if the ability got a... like, it's somewhat poorly named now because the system has evolved pretty heavily, but it's basically checking to see that you have a valid target, or the ability can be performed. But the AI doesn't have this. The AI simply just makes sure that the plan you're going to try and choose is going to be valid for your distance to the foe. And then when it actually goes to perform that plan, or it actually like takes that plan and tries to do something with it, it doesn't just say, hey, this is the ability, I'm going to perform it. It says, based off the plan you've chosen, it essentially comes up with its own list of movement to be able to successfully perform the ability that you've chosen. Huh. Okay. So in this setup that we have the enemy standing here. At this moment, it has performed an attack pattern and it has chosen one, but it has not done the actual final planning, right? Like, this all happens... Yeah, after CT gets below 0, then we actually take the next plan of attack, set it to whatever we were telegraphing we were going to do, and then actually try to execute on that plan. Determine all the movement spots, and then we queue that up, and it happens that turn, essentially. So the moment we telegraph and pick an ability, the AI hasn't even tried to predict what's going to happen with that ability. It just assumes, based off of my parameters I put in for distance, that it'll be able to do whatever it is that I've told it to do. And then if it actually can't perform that ability, the AI system fallback is just to move closest to the player. So if it can't do something, it just moves up to the player. So what we want to do instead is when we go to predict and choose an ability, we might want to choose an ability that says, hey, we want to go to this tile. And I'd like to know whether or not that's valid, because if we're standing somewhere like here, get trapped, at this point there is no valid spot that it can move to. So if we try and say, hey, the action I want you to do next is to try and move to the player's side or behind the player, that would not be possible, and it would be good for the AI to realize it can't do that and instead choose something else. And this is because I want to telegraph that move. The whole reason we're even talking about this is because we want to have some way for the AI to show that it's going to be moving, and for you to maybe not know the exact square, but based off of the symbol or the color of the choice, probably a combination of the two, but you would end up knowing, oh, it's going to move somewhere nearby, or it's going to try and move behind me. And then my hope is that we can potentially build a system where you can preemptively attack where they're going to be. So like in this situation, I know the AI is probably coming towards me, so being able to like select the square and attack. You know what? Let's come at this from a different approach. I do think I want to build some sort of movement system. I think it's going to be pretty heavy, and we can even start it today, but maybe what we should do is even just check whether or not my initial kind of idea for making it so that the player can attack squares that have no valid enemies is going to work. If we steal process input, right, and we come into here, and rather than just trying to add this directly to the on submit, why is it complaining? Interesting. This didn't need the override? This is a screen. This is a menu screen, that's why. Okay. So yeah, so this overrides the process input, and then instead of getting the abilities or anything like that, we're simply going to get button west, I think is what we're going to label this on, and this will be like our override and perform ability button. So if we hit this button, I think I want to just skip the valid check, but maybe keep the must have an ability target check. This process return, I think, is for consuming the input, and I don't want to do that here. Okay, so I think, very rough test, if we hit the west button, essentially it will now try and close the screen and perform the current selected ability, even if there isn't listed as a valid target. Which in some situations means you could just miss because you're performing an attack on an empty square. But I'm curious, I think this might be fun. So like if we move away, which is the easier version to set up, we know the enemy is going to try and move towards us right now. So if we look this way and then hit this button, we still missed because they got close enough after chasing and then had enough time to actually move, which is funny. So here it's going to try and move away again. There's still not much we can do about that. I guess we can take this hit to test, and now we know it's going to move next to us, but we don't know if it's moving to the side or in front. So if we hit slash and then we can preemptively hit where it's going to be. See, I think that's interesting. I don't know if it's fun, but it's interesting. These are the parts that I still don't have a good solution for, though, because the AI is currently planning to move away to try and do the range attack, and we don't really have a good way of doing anything in this situation. We can try moving in a random direction, hoping that we chose the same kind of direction as the AI, but if the AI ever tried to move back, we can't follow it. The system won't let us move into the tile where the AI is. Okay, we're gonna try, yeah, maybe I've been coming at this backwards all stream. It sucks that the first half an hour I was doing this in reverse, but maybe instead of looking at enemy behavior and the movement, maybe we should focus on looking at creating some AoE abilities and see if it's even fun to try and like override the attack and attack in a direction where there's nothing there in hopes that the enemy will move there. Like predicting the enemy's behavior. And then we'll need to come up with a more elaborate system for the AI's movement so that we can better control it, so that it's easy to telegraph what the AI is going to do, so that the player can feel smart when they actually do predict their movements correctly. So if we go into Bash, and let's just try making that a more AoE heavy ability, it's currently trying to damage which tile? It's trying to hit find tile by offset, and it's trying to find the tile in front of the player. Then it's doing a hit effect. We definitely have done abilities that are multi-attacks. How does cleave currently work? Oh, this uses a cleave ability range, which creates the pattern. Do we have any ability examples where it's ability driven? X cleave. This is an example. So here, this cleave attack is checking basically multiple tiles to see if an enemy is found in any of them. And if it finds an enemy in any of those tiles, it will try and perform the hit effect. So if we go back to Bash, and instead of just having one damage effect that is checking directly in front. If, in theory, we just create multiple damage effects, looking at X cleave as a reference, looks like we want to go 1x, negative 1x. So if we go 1x, and again, I'm mostly going to name this so that it's easy for me to see which ones are which. And then make one that is -1. And then we'll make 2 more. This one will be Y0, so it'll be at the same position of the player. So it'll be to the player's left, and I believe to the player's right. It might be vice versa, but it doesn't really matter. We're going to be covering all of these locations. We will try and hit enemies in kind of a cleave arc around the player when we use Bash. And this will help because we've been struggling to find a way to make Bash feel useful. So giving it some more AoE potential should help in making it feel like it has more purpose. So in this situation, we don't know whether or not it's moving back or to the left or right, but if we use Bash, we have a good shot that we will end up hitting. Now that missed. Interesting. It should have found this tile as a valid location for the enemy. So I guess before we start getting into the elaborateness of like the AI moving, let's just try using Bash and hitting a stationary enemy and see what happens. So if we come from this angle, technically this tile should get hit by Bash, and it is not. Oh, you know what? I bet you we are checking found unit. There is no conditional on this. It should be resetting found unit each time. But technically this miss effect could be happening for each of these damage effects. So in this particular situation, I think we actually want to disable all the miss effects inside of each of the damage effects and instead bring this out and have it at the very end that if a unit was not found. That doesn't quite work either, because technically each of these will override found unit. So in this situation, we kind of need something a little bit more elaborate. Not too difficult, but we'll create a new empty object. Honestly, this probably doesn't even need to be in that section. It can just be outside and in between each of these damage effects. Any unit found. And this can be a set ability property ability effect. This component, please. And then it needs a property component. And this will be any unit found. And this will get set to 1. But we'll need a conditional as well. Conditional property component. And we will want to do this if we found a unit. So after we run this, if we found a unit, set any unit found to true, and then we just need to add that in between each of these. And then technically we need to do it one more time before miss. And then instead of miss checking found unit, it should check any unit found. And now it should only play the miss if it didn't find any unit in any of the tiles. I don't love how like large that got in terms of the amount of components, but I think this should function. Magnus with the hydrate, appreciate. Okay, so now if we come here, zoom in a little bit, we shouldn't see miss with bash. Okay. Cool. That seems good. Couple of problems. The animation obviously doesn't necessarily yield to, like, it feels like the bash is hitting straight on, so the fact that it's hitting multiple tiles doesn't feel immediately clear. Can we also UI select? I wonder if there's a way for us to show the UI select. We found last week that the UI select system wasn't working because we never get into these hit effects, I think. Because if we don't find a unit on that tile, we don't do the UI select tile. I'm curious if we go into damage effect and we just grab this UI select and we bring this out to here, would that allow us to see every single tile that this ability could be impacting? So if we come into here, no enemies nearby, and we do bash, yeah, now that's showing the actual arc. But we don't show that if we find an enemy in that pattern. And then, yeah, if we hit X to auto-complete or auto-attack, we can now force an attack pattern even though there's no one there. Oh, I missed the message, Magnus. Good evening to you as well. I hope you are having a good one. We are looking at some ability pattern stuff, and in general, just kind of tweaking the way the combat works to hopefully improve or make combat at least more interesting. What if we go back into the combat targeting system? Right now I'm auto submitting button press as soon as you get into this game screen. Where's it setting those button names? If we go into the UI real quick, go into UI combat screens, combat target select, open this up. Combat input center. Can we have it so all these CT backgrounds are off by default? Will the system still work if we turn them all off? And if we go into here, it looks like the strings aren't hard-coded. So this must be setting the string names. Yeah. So we can do add button west override. Not the best user-facing name, but for now it'll work for me just to see. Go back to the combat area. See if we just broke everything. I see the problem. I see the issue. Okay, so we need to go into that input center prefab. And in here, instead of defaulting to turning off these CT backgrounds, which are telling us how much cost each of the CTs have, we need to look at here where we're doing CT background and we're setting its activity. We can't just turn this object off, because if we turn off this object, it changes the size of the box, which is not what we want. So we need to toggle off the image and then toggle off the text, I think, is actually the better way to do this. So if we come back into this one, instead of taking the CT parent object, we'll take in an image. And then we can do a check on enabled and then set enabled, or do we just set enabled directly? It's just a get setter, so we can just do that. Looks fine. And then we also want to do honestly, it'll be faster if we just do this. Copy back to here, copy, redo, and then we want to do the same thing with the text itself. This is true. Dot game object. Cool. And then down here, a little bit more wordy, but should retain the size of the boxes while disabling the content on screens that don't need this information. And then the default state should be the same. So if we come into each of these images, they should all be defaulting the image off. And then all of these texts should be game object turned off. And then if they're needed, the associated component will turn them back on. Zoom in. Oh, something broke. Oh, I know. We did not add the reference. We set all that up, but we did not actually go into here and drag in the new images. Oh, it worked for some of them. Okay. Okay, we've got our attacks. If we go into bash, we can see now it says cancel, override, and confirm. We can't hit confirm, but we can do an override to perform that attack even though there's no target. And so now this allows us to oh, right. And that's cool. We also turned off the auto press A when we get into this menu. So now when we go to attack, we can actually see the tile. Oh, but we can't confirm. Interesting. Confirm only works if it's auto pressing the button, but we can override still. Super interesting. Okay, let's take a look at how this functions normally, or the way that I've had it set up normally for a while now, at least. I'm gonna guess that if we give it a moment, it like something's refreshing and it's not getting into the correct state to be selectable, which is odd, but this is a big decision point for me, though. I feel like deciding whether or not the target screen should be like a primary part of the play experience, or whether or not it should just be like a auto select if there's an enemy in front of you, is going to change whether the game feels adventure-y and action-y, or whether or not it's like tactical and like has a kind of more slow decision-making process. But I feel like a lot of the stuff we've been working on the last few weekends has been moving more towards this kind of tactical nature. I hit the wrong button. I hit defend. Let's try hitting slash while directly in front of the enemy. So if we come into here, we're going to hit this refresh. That's not what we want. We want to be in here. Okay, so we hit this as soon as we got to this update. We see that there is an ability target. That ability target is directional in nature, so it's targeting direction west. It's going to say valid as false. It's going to go through and check to see if any of the ability targets get valid back, and it does say that it is a valid target, and then it goes through and actually performs it. Fair enough. Now if we come into here and we turn off this call, oh, backwards, we want to add these comments back in, get rid of this breakpoint, and then see what happens when we hit A without it auto-selecting that, but instead just like the player decides to hit A to confirm their action. Then we can kind of see how that feels. So we walk up to here, hit A, we see the selection, then we hit A to confirm. Oh, interesting. We're not actually getting any inputs. This is still set. Can we see the input here? We can. Where does this come from in the call stack? Can we see? This makes sense to me. So then where does on button pressed come from? Ever. Find references. Oh, inside of the base menu screen. It's got its own version. Oh. Duh. Okay. So it's got its own version of button callback. And we've overridden this when we added our override button. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So then when we go back into here, instead of doing process override, is there... There is not a default setup for that west button. So we will need to override this. But we'll probably want to make sure that we actually do the base version as well. In what order? I don't think it really matters unless they end up overlapping, which they're currently not. So I think we can just do base.process inputs, and then we should be allowed to hit A again. Cool. Easy fix. Silly bug, but easy fix. So then here, we can now come up to the enemy, walk up, hit slash, and then hit A again, and we can perform the attack. I think this is preferred if this is the type of like experience we're going for, because we might have situations where we have enemies near other enemies. And so like if I was standing here and I hit, say, bash, or say I was looking this way and I hit bash and there was an enemy on this tile, it would auto perform in the old way. But now we might actually want to like change facing or something and then perform the attack from a specific direction. It feels weird for slash specifically because there's only one target. But even then, we might have multiple enemies around us and we might not want to target the one in front of us. We might want to target one to the left or to the right, especially because we move the players facing when they get hit. So if we take a couple of turns here, the player technically changes facing to look at the enemy, because I thought that was more effective in terms of the player not having to like change inputs or anything. But it also means that the player may end up facing the last enemy who hit them when they actually want to hit like a weaker enemy in a different direction. And it doesn't feel too bad having to hit A twice to confirm the attack. Yeah, this makes bash feel way more interesting because now the enemy's moving around a bunch. And so sometimes I don't want to use slash because it doesn't line up with their CT and I know they're going to move. So I'm just going to use bash in hopes that I hit them. I think that part of it, the hoping part, still feels a bit odd. Like I'm not either telegraphing enough information or the AI's behavior isn't predictable enough. Okay, so then we come back to the thing we started this stream on, which is enemy movement systems. So I think based off of what we've been playing with here, just making bash an AoE very quickly, validating that, you know, being able to select the direction of the attack allows us to have the most versatility. The dead enemy was still technically a target as well, which is interesting. Yeah, no, sorry, I trailed off there. But the point is that I think I like the direction this is going. I like the miss. I like the fact that if I don't know the enemy's moving, I can get into bad states. I can try and perform attacks, end up predicting the enemy's movement and hit them where they're going to be, not where they are. Like, all of that seems fun, quote unquote. It's just the enemy behavior stuff that needs to be more predictable. So that's the next thing we need to dig into or go back to again. So we're kind of returning to the problem we started with, And I kind of walked away from at the beginning of this stream because I'm not sure how to override this. Well, that's not true. I do know how to override it. I'm kind of just stuck in a bit of analysis paralysis where I'm just not sure which way I want to go with it. Like, there's so many different directions we could go with. So many different directions we could go with this setup. This is the one I'm looking for. So we know that right now the way the enemy currently attacks, this is where it's deciding its move options, but it's deciding it in a way that I can't interact with. Or not easily. I'd like to move it so that the actual ability itself tells the AI system these are the movement tiles I would prefer to go to, opposed to it just getting some movement options based off of the AI's range, essentially. So instead of having every movement option be the priority, I'd like to say, actually, I'd like to try and get to this spot. And again, coming back to the problems with that is what happens when that spot is not available. I think that the AI should not choose that as their next telegraphed option then, and instead should choose a different option. So we're going to need the AI to predict what they're doing by actually trying to perform the ability in some manner and deciding whether or not the ability it's going to try and perform is valid. And if that's not a valid ability, then the AI should move on to a new one, which I think in general sounds like a good idea. The problem is that means that the AI needs to think about potential move spots. But again, I don't know. I debate whether or not these are good or bad problems. We're just going to build it. That's what we're going to do, chat. We're just going to build it. We're going to build it, and we will find out if it's bad after we've built it. Because I don't want to spend forever thinking about the problem when we can figure out the problems as we discover them. I think it's just going to be faster for me, personally. So we're going to build a system in which the AI uses an ability and tries to somehow, from that ability, determine the move locations that it wants to go to. Let's start with gathering the data. I think that's the best place to start. How we get that data down to the AI's thinking level, where the AI is making its decisions, we'll figure out later. But step one is we need to come up with an ability where the AI can say, hey, based off where I am and the nearest foe, I would like to move to these tiles relative to that enemy. So we need a new prefab. So we're going to go into our abilities, which is going to be up here. We're going to go into the AI section. We're going to make a copy of the move ability. We want something simple here. The move ability is probably a good base to work off of. So we're going to copy this. Actually, do we copy the AI move? That's even simpler. Well, that's a typo. Yeah, the tricky thing is going to be deciding which of these to work with. We're going to use this wisp move as a base because it's pretty straightforward and I understand what it's doing quite easily. Okay, so this is going to be AI preferred. not predictive. What kind of... What is this? This AI ability is going to, in sentence form, this AI ability is going to try to move to the left or the right of the player. So this is going to be... It's a bit long, but we'll go with that for now. So AI move around target. I don't think it's going to need the hit system. It's not going to need the distance. It will need to default found tile, valid tile. It won't need power because this won't actually be doing any kind of attacking. It's just going to be trying to find a tile. And it will not need an ability type. Okay. And then... instead of the way that we currently do stuff, where we say, hey, find unit, and this is basically checking from the enemy, it's going to look one tile in front of it, essentially. 0 on the X and Y1 is essentially forward facing. And so it's going to check and see if it can find a unit, and it will tell this property variable whether or not it found a unit. This one here, find tile, is going to check to see whether or not the tile is valid, whether or not it found tile, and whether or not it found a unit. And it needs these things to be in these values, so it needs to have valid set to 1, found tile to 1 as those default parameters. And then if it didn't find a unit, then it will also try and find the tile in front. Once it finds the tile in front, I believe it does a little bit of magic inside of our target system, which is kind of like a blackboard almost, where it sets some the tile as the location that we're now looking at. And then it checks to see if that tile we just set, which is going to be the one right in front of the enemy, it's going to check to see whether or not that's a valid destination, which is saying, is it occupied, essentially? And that sets whether or not this tile is valid. If that tile is valid, then it will try and do site stuff in order to reveal all the tiles on the board, and then we'll also move, and it's trying to move to whatever tile we last set. Okay. So I think we need a new ability component, because instead of doing it this way, what we want to do is we want to find nearest foe. And we do this logic in the AI already, but we're going to want an ability effect that finds nearest foe and potentially sets that foe's tile as our current tile target. And then from there, we'll be able to check tiles to the left and to the right of that location. And by check, I mean we will determine whether or not they are empty. And I guess also we'll need to determine whether or not we can traverse to those tiles. Because it's possible that a tile could be empty, but completely blocked on all sides. So we wouldn't want to pick that tile as a location to move to either. And then if it meets all of the criteria of being empty and navigatable to, then we want to add it to a list of target tiles to move to. And we want to say that this has at least one, and that'll make it valid. So we'll want to set that this is a valid ability. And then we'll have to perform this ability when the AI is trying to think about what it wants to do. And if it finds any valid tiles in this pattern, then it'll send that off and say, I will try to do this. And then at the actual moment when it tries to perform the action, it'll also use this ability to get the tiles, and it'll get injected into the get best move target. Okay, I think I can follow all that. I don't know in verbal form if I made it clear, but I have a good idea of what I need to do. So we need to go into here, and instead of find unit by tile offset, we need to find nearest unit. Okay, and then from find nearest unit, we will need to instead of based off of the player's direction, try and find a tile based off offset. We should look at how the AI currently finds nearest foe. How does this currently work? Not in a simple way. It has this call, which does a board search on the current unit's tile, trying to find an enemy that is of the alliance foe, which is a type that is not my type, essentially. Okay. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to bring this out to here. We're going to clear pretty much all of this, I think. We don't care about the target direction, but we may care about the target.get tile. What are the options for an ability target? What functions do we have access? We have get origin tile, we get target tile. We can set a target unit. You can get the direction. Okay. Let's just comment all this out. Let's put this down near the bottom. What did I comment out too many? I didn't comment out enough. So we can do this. Okay, so variables this does not have access to. It does not have access to the board directly, but we should be able to just do board.instance because it is a singleton and there's only ever one of them. It's going to need access to unit.currentTile. In this situation, I think that's going to be the target. So we're going to give it the ability target. We're going to put that here. And from here, instead of current target, I think this is going to be get origin tile. Because origin tile will be the tile that the AI is on. This just hard finds the player as the entity we're trying to attack. Okay. Stand by, chat. Thank you, chat. Appreciate you. I am back. I think we've cleaned up find nearest foe. And then I also have T now, which is, I don't know, I just wanted T. And now we've got find nearest foe set up. And so we can get access to the nearest enemy, or at least the nearest priority enemy if we have one. Yeah, so this is basically just checking to see if it has a player state beta instead of an NPC setup. So it prioritizes the player over an NPC is all this is really doing, but we mostly just care about nearest foe. So we can get the nearest foe. And then once we have that nearest foe, oh, this doesn't work. Some of these other get components and children calls may not also work in this situation. Actually, looking at this in, well, no, this will work. Yeah, because this is all happening inside of the board search delegate, essentially. So this should be fine. It's just this call that's kind of busted. And that is here that was being used. So we need to know the alliance of the attacker. Our ability effect system has a way of doing that, but I do not have a good idea of where to find an example. Exposure? No. Flash sprite? Here. Attacker versus defender. So I think if we're thinking about this in terms of the enemy in this situation would be the attacker. So we can do this call to get the correct alliance. So that'll fix up that call. And then this will do find nearest foe, passing in the target to mostly for the origin tile. And that will set this nearest foe to a value. If it is not equal to null, that means we found an enemy. And I think we want to do target.set target unit to that foe. Interesting. Looking at the code we commented out, it looks like when we normally do a find unit by tile... Oh, we've been modifying the wrong one. Cool. Let's go back into here, copy all of this, paste it over here, and then modify this back to its original form. Cool. And this needs to be renamed to find nearest unit effect. Okay, so yeah, so looking at the way that the find unit by tile offset worked, it looks like if it failed to find a unit on that tile, it would set the preview tile. I think in our situation, if we fail to find the unit or a nearest foe, I don't think we want to keep going. Like, we're not going to need to set a preview tile in this situation, I don't think. So we can set property to 1 here. But it's also possible, I haven't looked at this in a long time, that might cause issues. Honestly, this whole system with the, like, finding tiles and units and how it interacts with other ability effects is something that I'm still not super happy with. We may stumble into some stuff that I want to clean up as we work through this. Okay, so when we predict the ability effect, we will determine whether or not we can find a nearest foe, and if we find one, we will set the property associated with this ability effect to 1, and we will set the target unit to nearest foe, and we will set the preview tile to null. And then when we actually apply the construction of this into a sequence step, I think it's the same logic. Why was this separated out? Why was predict doing one thing and apply constructed doing something else? Because predict is basically saying I would like to preview what this ability is going to do, and apply and construct is saying I would like to perform this ability. So why are these different? Ah, I see. This one just sets the unit target. This one sets the preview. I see. Is that the only difference between them? This section looks identical to this section. Get direction, align, target, offset, tile, align, target. Oh, use origin tile. If that's toggled, it does something slightly different. Okay, but otherwise, yeah, the way it handles these if statements is also a little different as well. But I think for our purposes, because it's either a found or not found, I think we can do predict internal. And that should just do what we need. We'll find out if it causes problems. I'm sure we'll find out rather quickly. So this actual perform is just going to predict internal, which will do the same setup. And this is just finding the nearest foe and setting it to the blackboard, aka our ability target, setting it to the target unit to be that nearest foe. Cool. So if we come back into here, instead of doing find unit by tile offset, we can do find nearest foe. It doesn't like that. It doesn't like that because I have some sort of bug in my setup. Maybe? Find nearest unit. No, okay, it just wanted me to stop. So we'll drag this up here. This one doesn't need an offset, so we can remove that. And I don't think we care about use origin tile in this setup either. What was the difference here? If we use origin tile, we use origin tile instead of get target tile. Yeah, okay, yeah, we don't care about that in this setup. So we can remove both of these. And then this call will set a property for whether or not it found a unit. Now, if it found a unit, unlike the normal move setup, which says we don't want to find a unit because we want to find an empty tile, in our setup we do want to find a unit. So we want to have a conditional property that's going to want to validate that unit was found, expected value 1. And then here, I don't think we care about... maybe we do care about this, because we want to now start finding the tiles around the player. Now that we found the enemy, we want to find tiles around... Yeah, okay. Once we found the nearest unit, the next step in our setup is we want to try and find tiles to the left and to the right of that unit. So we do want to do find tile, but I don't know if this one here, find tile by tile offset, is going to do what we need to, because this is going to use get target tile, and we've changed to target a unit at this point. Because in here we do set target unit. Let's find the implementations of this. I believe we care about... Oh, interesting. We want to do a find references on this one in here, set target unit. Weird that it's showing it as not applicable down here. But these are the ones I'm looking for. The tile, the unit, and the ability direction. So the ability direction is the only one that actually uses this. Which I guess makes sense because the majority of our system is just set up on ability direction. So I have not kept up with keeping targeting units and targeting tiles as functional. Yeah, okay, so there's going to be bugs if I ever try and target a tile or target a unit, it looks like, because I've built so many of my ability effects around the fact that all of our abilities right now are directional based targets. So we target west, north, east, south, essentially, with almost all of our attacks. Okay, that's a different problem for a different day. I'm seeing cracks in the system. But for here, I think we want to do... We want to validate that the way that we will use this ability will be with an ability direction. So I'm going to go take a look at how the player's getting used. So in here... No? Take me to the ability select. Ability select screen. Okay, now it opened it. When we select an ability, we go to the target screen, and this has... Here is where we do the prediction. Where do we actually build this? Here. If it is an effect-driven ability, which is almost all of them right now in our current prototyping, like this, we basically only do abilities of this type. We use an ability direction target. Okay. Meanwhile, if it was a full ability target, it might just create a list of ability targets based off of the units directly. Okay. Okay, I think I've validated then that I think for us, we can just use set target unit. So inside of this ability target, if I was to try and get set unit, current target, I can't use get tile. Find tile by offset. This gets target tile. So this assumes the target tile yeah, find tile by offset looks to be the only spot we actually set the target tile. That doesn't make any sense, though. At some point, it must default to something. Oh, by default for directional based, it's based off our origin. Okay, so then for find nearest unit, we also need to set target tile once we find a foe to be the current tile of that foe. Cool. Once we've done that, that actually unlocks this new ability effect to work with all the other ones. So if we want to find tile 1, X, and 0, this would be the tile, I think, to the left of the player. Because we've now reset our target tile to be the origin of the enemy we just found. So as long as we found a unit, we should be able to find a tile to the left of the player. In order for it to be valid, it needs to be walkable. And then we need to see if that is a valid destination tile. That still remains the same. And then in here, we're checking to make sure that it was valid. And if it was valid, this is where we actually do the movement part. This part goes away, but we can keep this mostly in that we would want to save this tile. If we get all the way down to the bottom here, we would want to say that this found tile is correct. Now, when we find a new tile, oh, interesting. Every time we change, we move to a new tile, we're essentially re-changing where the target tile is. Okay, okay. That doesn't really make a ton of sense, though, because if we go back and look at the Bash is targeting 5 different tiles back to back, and I'm never resetting, or I didn't think I was resetting the origin point. So here, find unit by tile offset. Oh, this isn't using find tile. This is finding unit by tile offset. And these side effects aren't moving either. Yeah, so the moment that we do this, it's changing the target tile if it finds one. if it's a valid tile to step on or to go to, it changes our kind of cursor, you could think about it. So if I wanted to, in our system here where we want to find specific tiles adjacent to the nearest enemy, we would need to move back to the enemy each time. And we do that, the reason we move our kind of cursor to that new tile is because we then use all these other ones to get target tiles. So the tile has modified. Okay. That's confusing. But that means that if we then want to check the tile to the right of the player, we now need to go to the two to the right, because 1 to the right is back to the center where we started, and then 2 to the right is now over to the correct location. But the problem then becomes, what if we didn't get into... Well, no, that's still fine. It feels like the... I think what we might want to do is set the origin tile. Can we even do that? No, we can only get the origin tile. We can't re-change it. That's a frustrating aspect of this. I guess I wanted to encapsulate it so things couldn't change the origin, but in this particular situation, it'd be nice to be able to say use origin tile. The other option is we could say use unit tile. And then instead of using the origin tile, we could do get unit and then get its current tile. That way we were always kind of recentering back to the nearest foe that we were focused on. We'll see if that works. Feels like an easy solution here. So then this can now use a unit tile instead. Use target units tile. And then this can just be -1. Okay. And then this allows us to check any number of tiles offset from the player without having to worry about the target tile, aka our kind of our cursor moving around on us. Okay. So then the question becomes, what is at the bottom here? Because it's not a move effect. It's instead storing... Like if we found a nearest unit and we found it had a tile to the left of it that is a valid destination tile, it is a tile that you're allowed to walk to, This is not doing anything other than just checking if it's occupied. So it's not checking to see if there's a valid walking path to get there, which will be something we'll want to do. But if we say that it's valid, for now we could at least start with this basic version and add the condition of making sure it's walkable, or there's a route to reach that tile later. At this point, we want to save this tile as, hey, this is a tile we'd like to go to. Where are we saving that to? Does that go into here? I think it does. I think this ability target over time, over the last, however many months or whatever, I feel like I've slowly started to realize this isn't just for directional stuff. I think that the fact that we made this interface go onto the tile and onto the unit, I believe, somewhere in here. Doesn't matter. Point is, it's also a unit. So the idea was that, like, oh, an ability target could be a direction, it could be a tile, or it could be a unit. But I think the way that we use the system, we've kind of just defaulted to only ever using this version. And I think what that means is, instead of having the tile and the unit be targets, I think what we should have is have like a target information class, and you can set up a tile to be the target in this information class, or you can set up a unit to be the target in this information class. But I don't think the tile and the unit should have to implement all of these interface calls. But I think this ends up being the blackboard, because not only is it being used to track what our target is, it does send information out, like we see in the ability target screen, where we check to see whether or not this ability, after we predict it, whether when we preview it, essentially, we then find out whether or not it had any valid effects. Was there an effect in here that's good enough that you would be willing to perform this ability? If it's a move, but it didn't find any move effects, then don't let the player choose it, right? In the same way, the AI is also going to need some amount of information coming out of this preview to be like, hey, do I want to actually do this ability? So I think what I need to add is a function in here for set movement tiles and get movement tiles, and this is for the AI. And I think rather than rip up the entire system and swap out unit and tile, I think that I want to just get this functional, and we'll worry about a bigger refactor later. But it is going to be weird, because we're going to have to add these interfaces to the tile and the unit for now. So if we go to the tile, it's going to complain about this. I think we can just let it implement them for us. This is going to be a list of tiles. And this is going to return null. And then we need to put the same thing in the unit. Sure, that'll get me close enough. And we're going to put the same broken information in here. And then inside of the actual ability target, this is going to have a list of tiles. Which will be the movement tiles. Okay, and then in here, this becomes new. List on setup, and then anytime we want to add something, oh shoot, this needs to be a tile. That means we're going to have to change the system a little bit, and then this returns this list. Okay, so we do quick copy and paste. We're going to put this into unit. This goes here. Tile, this goes here. And then inside of the interface, this needs to get updated in the definition. Cool. So now the ability direction has the ability to set and add a list of movement tiles that we can hold on to and keep information about, and then we can get that information. So if we go into here, instead of a move ability effect, we're going to do... Where does this go? I think it's one of these simple ones. Let's copy this. Visual Studio is going to have a big old think for a second. We're going to close it. We're going to rename this. Visual Studio is going to have another think. Set movement tile effect. Second big think from Visual Studio, and then we're gonna copy this name, and then we're gonna make sure we open it and hope it opened the right one. I'm gonna double check that before we start editing this time. Okay, and so then in here, instead of doing a sequence step, I think on sequence step perform we do nothing in this situation. Really, this whole setup is mostly just for the predict part. What just happened? Like, all my tabs disappeared. Okay, well... yeah, all the stuff we were working on is gone. Let's go back up here and find nearest unit. So in this situation, we're going to want to get target tile. And we're going to override the predict. And then we can do target dot set movement tiles. I guess set isn't even a good name for this. Can I do a quick rename? Will this work properly everywhere? This will become add movement tiles. Looks like it modified it everywhere correctly except here. And then we can do target dot get target tile. I guess weirdly we don't even need to necessarily pass this information in. It should already have this information. But I'm gonna just still do it this way. And then we shouldn't need to call predict internal in this setup. And so then finally, if we do set AI, it doesn't like something. What did I mess up? I'm just going to hit Control Shift S. The interface it never got changed. What else did I get wrong here? No, that was it. Okay. So now if we do move, remove here, set AI movement tile, add that here, delete this one. I believe this will check to see whether or not the tiles on either side of the player, to the left and to the right, whether or not they... How does it know the facing? Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's based off of... It's currently based off of what direction was given in from the main character. That's where it's getting this direction offset from. But I think we actually want it to be based off of the unit in this situation. Can I just do target.getUnit? Yeah, this will override the align offset to be based off of the current target units. So the nearest foe we found, get its direction, get that as the alignment point for the offset. And then use that to determine the target point. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I just realized that we never really figured out how it was aligning to the actual enemy. So that should fix that. And that'll just use the same tick box. So it will come into here when it tries to predict this ability. It will see whether or not it can find a nearest unit. If it found a nearest unit, then if the found unit was true, it'll come in here and try to, using the target unit's tile, and now internally we know its direction, it will try and find a tile to the left of it that is walkable. If it finds a valid tile, aka one that is not occupied, then it'll set this as a valid tile. Then it has an empty ability effect that makes sure that valid tile is true, which really could just be on this one as a conditional. And then it gets down into this ability effect, which will set this tile, the current target tile, as a movement location. And then we come back up here. Now at this point, found tile will get reset based off of whatever this one finds. So it will be re-evaluated. The valid tile will get reset based off whatever that one finds. And then conditionally, if it found that that's valid, it'll also be another movement location. Okay, so I think this ability, when we call predict on it, will return a ability target that has either a list of 2 tiles in it, 1 tile, or no tiles, depending on whether or not those tiles were valid unoccupied locations. We'll add more conditional logic in here and effects that will check to see whether or not the AI could walk to those tiles later. Oh, we're at time. Okay, well, we're going to continue this with part 4 in about 2 hours. As usual, Sundays we stream from 2 to 4 PST, or I guess it's PDT because we're in daylight time. Anyways, from 2 to 4, and then we take a break for 2 hours, and then we do dinner, and we stream again, we take 2-hour break for dinner, and then we come back from 6 to 8. So I'll be back in about 2 hours. At this point, more like an hour and 50 minutes ish. And we'll continue where we left off here. The next steps will be setting it up so that this information that we're kind of saving into the ability target will go up to the level where the AI can actually know about it, and then try to use those as priority movements instead of whatever else it was trying to do. Yeah, that's the plan. We'll come back and we'll work on that. For now, though, this is going to be totally signing out.